What they found is that their body physically did not change from what phase of the cycle they were in. However, there was a significant effect of the menstrual cycle on their perceived size. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. My name is Brooks Herbis, and I'm an online fitness, nutrition, and mindset coach who's here to help you simplify and make sense out of the all too confusing fitness and nutrition industry. Let's be real, there's a lot of conflicting information online, and it can be hard to know what's legit and who to trust. In every episode, I'll be sharing the science and psychology behind health, fitness, and long-lasting behavior change. But I'll also be sharing real-life practical application, because all of the best info in the world only matters if you can actually apply it to your real life. So grab a coffee, water, glass of wine, or lace up your walking shoes, and let's dive in. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to the Sweat Simple podcast. Today is a super exciting episode because I am breaking down a little research study for you guys. And if you don't know, I am an evidence-based approach, or I'm an evidence-based coach who uses an evidence-based approach. And what that means is that we don't just go off vibes. The methods that I use with my clients, what I share on this podcast, it is backed by research. We are not just using, things that might be true and things that work for other people. It's like, no, we know that these things are shown to work. There are studies to back it up. The nutrition protocols I use, the types of workouts that I program, the mindset techniques that I use with my clients, it is all backed by science and psychology. So you know that when you're listening to this podcast, when you are working with me, you are getting things that are truly, we can't say proven when we were talking about research, but with things that are shown in the research to be effective for large populations of people too. So we're not cherry picking data. These are like really strong methods. So today, though, we are talking about the menstrual cycle and body image and how your menstrual cycle impacts your body image. And before we dive into that, I want to do a quick recap on the menstrual cycle phases, just to start to give you guys a little bit of a background if, this isn't something you're super familiar with, because I feel like for a lot of us, maybe we got like one health class in like 7th grade. And then we're not really taught much about our menstrual cycles unless you're, like actively trying to get off hormonal birth control or trying to conceive. And even then, sometimes we don't have much info on the menstrual cycle. So a quote unquote regular menstrual cycle is defined by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists as 21 to 35 days long. And the menstrual cycle is really governed by estrogen and progesterone, and it falls into 4 different phases. So estrogen and progesterone are 2 hormones, and them rising and falling kind of indicates where we are in these 4 phases. So your cycle starts on day 1 with menstruation. So day 1 of your period is the first day of your menstrual cycle, and for most people, that typically lasts between 4 to 6 days. Then we move into the follicular phase, which moves from, and I'm going to be honest, guys, I think I mispronounced that most of the time, but we're just going to roll with it. I should have looked that up before I started this, but I didn't. But that goes from day 7 to day 14 for most people. Then ovulation usually occurs mid-cycle around day 5, and then you move into your luteal phase, which is that phase right before your period. So usually that's between days like 15 to 28-ish. And I kept saying words like on average for most people ish, and that's because every single cycle is unique, and you can even have individual cycles that are unique as well. So not every single cycle is, unless you're on something like hormonal birth control, if you're having a natural cycle, some days, some months your cycle might be 24 days. Some months it might be 25. Some months you might ovulate on day 16. Other months you might ovulate on day 15. you shouldn't have a ton of variation, but there is going to be some variation. And again, these are all averages. Yours might look different, and that's why it can be really hard to talk about these things. And this is why research around the menstrual cycle is difficult in general, and why, blanket statements around things like cycle syncing aren't very helpful. It's because every woman's cycle is unique. We have these like averages, but they're pretty broad averages. And again, like your individual cycle can be unique. So a lot of times, like the research and these like blanket statements, it's just not really helpful. And if you do want to learn more about my thoughts on cycle syncing, and again, what the research says about cycle syncing, I have a full podcast episode about that, which I will link in the show notes. But the purpose of this podcast is to dive into how body image specifically might be impacted by the menstrual cycle. So let's dive into the nitty gritty of it. So this study was done at a Brazilian university, and it was really attempting to investigate how different stages of the menstrual cycle impacted our body perception and our body satisfaction. So how we actually perceived our body, what we thought it looked like, and then also our overall like satisfaction with it. So that it kind of like mirrors the two or pairs the two together to come up with overall like body satisfaction depending on where we are in our menstrual cycle. And the women, to complete the study, the women came in during each phase of their menstrual cycle. They had body measurements taken, and then they completed an assessment to determine their overall body dissatisfaction. And in order to do that, they basically looked at 9 different female body types, like on a piece of paper, and the women then circled which body type. So all these body types looked different, and they scaled from, let's say someone who was like very thin to someone who was maybe like a little bit overweight. And there were 9 of them on a paper, and all the women came in during each phase of their menstrual cycle, and they just circled which one they thought was most similar to their body type and which was their ideal body type. So they circled the one that they thought looked most like them, and then they circled the one that they wanted to look like most. And their body dissatisfaction was found by finding the difference between the two. Now, if you're listening, you probably recognize that the study definitely had some limitations. Like, just because you aren't currently at your ideal body type doesn't automatically mean that you're dissatisfied with your body. In fact, that's actually something I help my one-on-one coaching clients cultivate, is how do we still feel confident and how do we still appreciate our body even when we do have fat loss goals. So just because you're not where you necessarily want to be doesn't automatically mean that you're dissatisfied with your body. Like, we can still really appreciate our body. We can still be happy in our body, and also maybe have goals to change our body composition or change something. So that is a limitation of this study. But at the same time, there still were some really interesting findings, even taking that aside. And what they found was that there were no significant changes in body mass, BMI, waist and ab circumference, or body composition. So during each of these 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, like I said, those women were getting measurements done. And what they found is that their body physically did not change from what phase of the cycle they were in. However, there was a significant effect of the menstrual cycle on their perceived size. So their physical body was not changing, but their perception of their body was changing. And the participants judged their size as largest during the menstrual phase. So, AKA body dissatisfaction, peaked during the menstrual phase. And this was actually a little bit different from previous studies that suggested body dissatisfaction peaked during our luteal phase. So, just kind of interesting though that we now can see that body dissatisfaction likely peaks during or right before your period. So what does all of this mean? Why should you care about this as a female? First, like this makes sense. Like just even if we didn't have this study, we could probably predict this because typically for most people, bloating or during their four different phases of our menstrual cycle, it's typically peaking on day one of our cycle, or it's peaking right before our cycle. So super understandable that the days that we are extremely bloated and your pants feel a little bit tighter and you just feel like you're carrying all this extra weight, it would make sense that on those days we experience the highest amount of body dissatisfaction. So we feel like our body has changed quite a bit, but what's equally important to remember is that it doesn't actually change all that much. So remember, those women, their physical measurements, their BMI, their body, like actual circumference measurements, those did not change. So we might feel like our body has changed quite a bit, but physically, we are not actually changing all that much. And how does this relate to you? Like, why is this important to understand? And it's important to have this context because how many times have you been near or on your period and you notice that your body image is tanking? Maybe you've been crushing it on your fat loss goals. Maybe you've been feeling really confident in your body. And all of a sudden, you're like in that week before, or you're right about, or you're just started your period and all of a sudden, you feel way less satisfied with the progress you've been making. You start to question, like, is this even working? Like, my pants are fitting better and now they don't feel that way. And I'm just like not feeling comfortable in my body anymore. And maybe I should try a different approach to fat loss. We probably all had those feelings pop up, those body dissatisfaction feelings. And it can really help to start to recognize these trends and realize that they might be tied to where you're at in your menstrual cycle. Being able to identify, like, oh, I'm about to start my period, or oh, I'm on my period. Being able to tie some of these body image dissatisfactions back to that can help you realize what they are: thoughts and feelings, not facts. So remember, like, this is temporary. And remembering, like, hey, this is a temporary feeling. This is probably tied to where I'm at in my cycle. This is a feeling. This is not fact. It's going to help you be able to dismiss these thoughts a lot more quickly. So instead of like falling into this deep spiral of like, nothing's working, my progress isn't going anywhere, like I need to change everything up, it can help to take that pause and remember, okay, where am I at in my cycle? Does this make sense? Do I typically have different feelings about my body this time of the month? Oh, okay, yeah, I do. So, you know what? This is temporary. This feeling is going to pass. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I know that next week, when I'm not on my period anymore, I'm probably going to feel a lot better. So before I act anything, before I do anything, I'm going to wait to get out of this phase of my cycle and see how I feel about my body then. So remembering that, taking that pause, remembering that it's temporary, dismissing these feelings as feeling as opposed to fact. It also is going to help to practice cultivating a more positive body image in general. So, like I said, this is something that I work with my one on one coaching clients a lot on because, we don't only want your body satisfaction to come from reaching this goal weight. So, can you be proud of your body in other ways that aren't related to your physical appearance? Or are you tying your health and fitness goals to things that are related to things that aren't about your physical appearance? So, can you think about how you feel when you take care of yourself? Or, maybe you have like a specific strength goal. All of that tying things to not just fat loss, not just your appearance, not just the scale, that helps us cultivate a positive body image as well. So, to summarize, like even though your physical body measurements likely don't change throughout your menstrual cycle, body dissatisfaction often does and is usually the highest during the first phase of our menstrual cycle. So if you can remember this, it might feel easier to navigate some of these feelings in future weeks. Remember that these feelings are temporary, they are not fact. Take that pause before you act on them. that is all I've got for you guys this week. Don't forget, I always pick one person every single month who shares this episode on their stories or who leaves a podcast review in Apple Podcasts. You can't do it on Spotify. I pick one person to win a free fitness and nutrition audit each month. You'll get my eyes on your current routine so you can understand what you're doing well and where you might be missing a piece of the puzzle. So thank you guys so much for listening. As always, I will be here next week. We are talking all about what people who actually maintain their weight loss do differently. So I am super excited, and I will talk to you then.